Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 389. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. It is Friday, December 5th. Woo! We made it to Friday. You know what that means? Friday football, we taking the stage. It is Football Friday, and we got some picks coming, a huge weekend of college football. I am back home here in New York City, USA. Had a great trip out to the West Coast. Always a good reminder of how beautiful our country is and how much flying coach sucks, especially when you're a big dude. But there's a lot to get into today. We've got a great guest, a returning champion, Todd Achilles, the independent candidate for the U.S. Senate from Idaho, is back. He's running against Republican Jim Risch. He's been on the show before. He's going to help us break down all the latest and give us an update on what's going on in his race. You heard from independent Angus King, the only real independent in the Senate, earlier this week. Now you're going to hear from a guy who we hope will be the next independent senator in the U.S. Senate. But there's a lot happening today. The latest on the U.S. strikes and Hegseth and SignalGate and war crime stuff continues to evolve. The big news is that the IG report is now out. We are starting to get pieces of it. Members of Congress have been briefed. And here's the top line I think everybody needs to know. There's a quote. It's from the report that says, "The Secretary's action created a risk to operational security that could have resulted in failed U.S. mission objectives and potential harm to U.S. pilots." There it is, in black and white, for all to see, especially for our troops to see. And I think that is the bottom line. He put lives in danger unnecessarily, and I think he's got to go. Every day that he's not gone is another day our troops and all of America is at risk. It's another day our enemies are celebrating. There's now bipartisan calls on this. There is some partisan division around a briefing they got yesterday from Admiral Bradley and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Kane about whether or not this video, in particular, separately, right, from SignalGate, whether this video on September 2nd on the strike on an alleged narco boat, it's all coming out in the wash. The Democrats seem to say it was outrageous. The Republicans are saying it's part of war. We're going to pull it apart and find out. Rand Paul is one of the many people who says that everybody should see the full video. He's saying that Hegseth should testify under oath. I agree. It needs to all come out. Really important point from Ryan Goodman, who's a great lawyer who's been on top of this. He said this collapses the one argument Hegseth had against it being a war crime, because now there's reporting that the two men who were later killed that were floating on the capsized boat did not appear to have radio or other communications devices. We're going to dig into this. We're going to find out, did they have radios? Were they calling for backup? Were they not? This is all going to come out in the next couple of weeks. But I think the important overview point is that Hegseth is under siege from all sides. His incompetence continues to be revealed, and Trump is banging the drums for more war, including Venezuela. So Senator Jack Reed, an important voice on this, a West Point grad, said in a statement that the briefing confirmed my worst fears about the Trump administration's military activities. A reminder that these activities are not supported by most Americans and not authorized by Congress. And just in time, coming out of this yesterday, they are back at it. There hadn't been a boat strike since November 15th. Yesterday, after over 2 weeks of no strikes, at least disclosed strikes, and tons of controversy, there was a new one. They hit another boat. It's, again, still not authorized. And I think the number one story in the world is that Trump can do whatever he wants with the most powerful military the world has ever seen, and nothing seems to be stopping him. And in related news, his cabinet's not being stopped. A panel voted today to end recommendations for hepatitis B shots for all newborns. This is a big win for RFK Jr. in his quest to upend vaccine policy. The committee decided to limit at-birth hepatitis B shots to babies whose mothers are infected with the virus. I think this is crazy, and I think our enemies are celebrating. We're going backward against science, and it's going to cost lives, and this is another radical element of what RFK Jr. is doing. Speaking of radical, more information now about the alleged pipe bomber who was captured yesterday by the FBI. This is the guy who allegedly set up pipe bombs outside the RNC and DNC the night before the January 6 attacks. The suspect has now been named. He is Brian Cole, 30 years old. He's being alleged to have planted these pipe bombs, and they're saying now that he believed the election was stolen. So that was part of his motivation. We will find out much more about this guy. I'm hoping the great Scott MacFarlane from CBS will join us soon. Related to our national security, good news, I think. The flags at the Pentagon have been lowered to half-mast in honor of Specialist Sarah Beckstrom. We talked on this show about how they were lowered nationwide for Charlie Kirk, but not for Sarah Beckstrom, which I think should be done. In Ukraine, it's day 1379 of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Yesterday, Russian strikes on Kherson, on a heating plant, have left 40,000 people in the cold. This is an important thing to think about as winter hits Ukraine. Here in New York, and before the eyes of the world, the Mamdani experiment continues to unfold. And NYPD Commissioner Jess Tisch yesterday had to apologize to Mamdani after her brother called him an enemy of the Jewish people. Benjamin Tisch, who is the CEO of the Lowe's Corporation, criticized Mamdani on Wednesday night during remarks at a Met Council gala. Look, I think Mamdani continues to be very divisive. This is kind of a political powder keg that will come to a head starting in January when he's sworn in, and I think it's going to affect the whole country, so keep your eyes on that. Looks like Netflix may be buying Warner Brothers, a massive deal in the billions, which could disrupt or improve the amount of content you have over this cold winter. The grand jury refused to re-indict Letitia James after a judge threw out an initial charge. And finally, the World Cup draw is here today. Going over to sports, there's going to be a lot of excitement around the world. Aaron Judge, Tom Brady, and Donald Trump will likely make an appearance. It's happening as we record this midday on Friday. Last night, Dallas got beat by the Lions, which I think is always a good thing. Running back Jahmyr Gibbs now has 47 touchdowns in his first 3 NFL seasons, which ties Barry Sanders. That means it is Football Friday here. We will have those picks coming up. We're going to need football because it's getting cold, especially on the East Coast and the Midwest, and the politics is only heating up. And we're going to dig into it to close your week with some insight and some light because it is Friday football and it is Friday. Hooray. And it's definitely a time to stay vigilant. All right, folks, helping us stay vigilant, a guy who is in the middle of all of these issues because he's running for U.S. Senate. I think he's a man of integrity. He's a leader who's meeting the moment. He grew up on a family farm in Idaho. He's a U.S. Army veteran. He served as a tank commander and an armor officer. He's been on this show to lay out his entire case for his candidacy and why he's running. But I'm going to try to bring him and other independent candidates back on this show as often as possible now that we're daily. But he's a guy to help us end the week strong. The great and powerful Todd Achilles is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, good to see you, Paul.
After all that I threw out there, that was like the shortest hello ever.
Dude, that was the best rundown of a busy news week. I'm impressed.
I got to take a deep breath after that. But that's how much is coming at us, right?
It's crazy.
It feels crazy. And I think we need leaders who can help us make sense of it. Leaders who can meet the moment. I think you're one of them. I want to get into all of it. But how are you and where are you? You've been running all over the state, man. I don't know if there's any candidate who's putting more miles in than you or has more beautiful backdrops when you do videos. I mean, you come from these beautiful places that are like a postcard, but where are you and how are you, man?
Well, I'm actually down in the southeast corner of Idaho today in the town of Pocatello, which is an old railroad town and the home to Idaho State University. But I've been spending this week in eastern Idaho, had a meet and greets and house parties and had a nice talk with the Idaho Falls City Club yesterday. And it's been great, man. You're right. I've traveled to all 44 counties over the last couple of months. This is the most beautiful place in America. It's just amazing.
What's the vibe out there, man? I mean, you're meeting with all kinds of people. You're meeting with leaders from different industries, business, nonprofit, political, and in particular, you know, you have a focus on national security stuff as a guy who served in the Army. What's your read on how this is being received in Idaho right now?
You know, it's interesting. I'm able to have conversations with folks as an independent that I think if you've got a party, you got an R or D behind your name, you can't do it. I've done over 50 town halls so far across the state. And I'll tell you, I'm getting red hats and truckers hats and hard hats and cowboy hats showing up to my meetings. And man, everybody's pissed. Everybody sees the same problem, right? They see this rigged economy that's not working, and they see the corruption in Congress. Now, there have been, like in 24, there are 2 different theories about how to fix that. But people are coming together now and saying, listen, what I'm hearing on the right side isn't working for me, and what I'm hearing on the left side isn't working for me. And we can't continue to function like we've been functioning. We need to do something new.
I think that's really important. I was at a meeting in California talking about veterans issues, talking about the rise of independence. There are people who are talking about, affordability and talking about instability and talking about ICE. And I think like there's a lot of different pieces, but I think there's a common thing that this show was originally called Angry Americans. And we said, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. People are pissed off. People are really, and they have good reason to be pissed off. There's a lot to be pissed off about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the big thing in Idaho, we used to be a low wage state, but it was just cheap to live here. And as our longest serving governor, Cease Andrus, who was a Democrat, used to say, living in Idaho is that extra paycheck. But now we're still low wage, but it's expensive to live here. And whether it's housing or food, particularly in rural communities, it's not cheap to live in rural communities. And people just that gap is getting bigger and bigger. And folks just like, I don't know how to bridge it.
So we'll dig into that a little bit more later in the show, but I want to move to what I think has to be our top topic. Especially after this incredibly chaotic week, especially around our national security. There's so many pieces to this, right? There's SignalGate, which you can uniquely understand as a unit commander. There's the boat strikes, right? And then there's the larger question of a potential war with Venezuela. There's the continued deployments of the National Guard. Well, some people forgot that 2 National Guardsmen were shot on the night before Thanksgiving, right? But I think there's overall still the Pentagon and Hegseth are maybe the most important chess piece on the board right now, especially now because National Guard troops are being deployed stateside, because America's sons and daughters from places like Idaho may be asked to fight on the ground in Venezuela. I know folks keep saying it's all about the economy, but let me ask you to bring it back there. Number one, your reaction to what's happening, and also how it impacts Idaho. Because I think sometimes folks say, oh, people don't care about national security. All they care about is I think they do, especially in places like Idaho, where a disproportionate number of your young men and women serve. They serve on active duty. They serve in the National Guard. This means something to them. When they see a National Guard soldier get shot, they say that could have been my kid. But how do you see it out there, Todd?
Yeah, and the National Guard in Idaho is, it's a serious unit. These guys train hard, and a lot of folks in the state serve. And also in terms of the veteran community, on a per capita basis, Idaho's got the 6th highest share of veterans in the U.S. I think Montana's 5th, Wyoming's 4th, right? So this part of the world, a lot of us have deployed and we know what it's like. And so when we see that we're taking steps towards another conflict that's going to have, our military engaged, folks really, we push back. And it's non-political. Nobody wants to be engaged in these forever wars anymore. Like, if we're going to do something, tell me why. Tell me what the national security imperative is. It convinced me that this is worth deploying people. And if we're going to do it to win and get us out. And that's the message I hear from everyone across the state.
Talk about Hegseth, because I think this is a defining moment. If a guy like you was in the Senate, I don't know if you would have voted for him. I always run the scenario and say, look, if Dan Osborne had won in Nebraska, he probably would have voted no on Hegseth. We wouldn't have Hegseth. It would have slowed down some of the other crazy nominations like RFK Jr., who wants to get rid of vaccines. But I really want to emphasize that I think one vote in the Senate and one independent vote in the Senate could be the difference for America. That's why I think your race is so important. It's not just about Idaho. It's about having a fulcrum, having at least one independent senator who can hold the line on issues of integrity and independence. But talk about him specifically. I don't know if you would have voted for him if you were there. And I've asked this of every senator who's on. I asked Angus King if he would support him. He said no. If you were in the Senate right now, what would your response be?
I would not have confirmed him. And actually, a buddy of mine who's a state senator from this part of the state, we wrote an op-ed when his name first came up for confirmation in the Senate. And, my buddy here, Senator James Ruttke, he was a West Pointer. We both served on active duty about the same time. We both had the same reaction, which is he doesn't have any fundamental concept about how to lead. He doesn't understand the job. He doesn't have the experience. And this guy's totally unfit. And I tell you, the guy I'm running against, Senator Jim Risch, he took the politically expedient, he took the easy way out in voting for Hegseth. And he's putting troops at risk, and he's putting our national security at risk. And that's just unacceptable, Paul. We know the deal, right? As a leader, you make hard decisions. And both of our senators, right? Risch has been there since 2009, and Crapo he's on his 5th term. How many qualified secretaries of defense has Crapo voted for and Risch has voted for? And the logic to say that, Hegseth is in the same category as the other ones that we had, come on, man. If you can't even vote against somebody as fundamentally unqualified as Hegseth, what the hell are you doing there?
I think it cuts to the corruption, right? I mean, the corruption by the parties, by the loyalty. It's why I get excited about an independent veteran being there. Risch is not a veteran, right? I don't think Crapo's a veteran either. And this is why you need them, right? Because they can ask tough questions about stuff like SignalGate. They know, I know, you can't use your personal cell phone, right? This is a really basic thing. Can you imagine, let's use a Republican, Donald Rumsfeld or Dick Cheney, who were secretaries of defense, Bob Gates, trying to justify using his personal cell phone on Signal? It would be laughable. But I think it's really important that folks understand how important it is to have a veteran there who knows this stuff and who has the spine to stand up. So there's a leadership crisis, Todd, and Hegseth is the manifestation of that. If you're in the Senate, what do you do now on that? What do you do on this Venezuela boat issue? What do you do on the issue of the War Powers Act? Congress has abdicated their responsibility right now. The senators from your state are not stopping Trump from going to war, right? Or at least asking hard questions before he sends folks from Idaho to war. What would you be doing differently if you were in the Senate?
Well, let's start at the top with Hegseth. So, I mean, listen, if we haven't figured out this guy's fundamentally unfit by this point, I don't know what's wrong with you. So he's got to go. And we either force him to resign. If I'm in the Senate, I'm either forcing him to resign or we're looking at other ways to force him out. But again, he's putting troops at risk. He's making bad decisions. He's violating OPSEC. Just across the board, this guy's unfit. So number one, we need to get rid of Hegseth, and we need to do it sooner rather than later. Number two, on Venezuela, I've been doing a couple of social media posts on this, and I've been trying to do what Risch is not doing, which is explain to Idahoans what the hell's going on in the justification. And one of the ways I've done to just try and simplify it is think about it as a 2x2 matrix, right? You have either a crisis or an emergency on sort of one side of the matrix, and then you've got criminals or terrorists on the other side of the matrix, right? And if you put those two together, what the administration is claiming is that this is an emergency, because it's terrorists. So they're kind of that bottom right quadrant, and that gives the president the authority to respond to it. Fine. Everybody else is saying that, no, these are bad guys, but they're criminals, and this is a crisis. So it's up in the upper left quadrant. And we have the tools to stop drugs coming in. It's called the DEA. It's called the Coast Guard. We've been doing this for decades, and we can do this legally. We can capture the boats, and we can, put these people on trial and follow the rule of law. And listen, if there are too many damn boats, then how about we have more Coast Guard cutters instead of like G500 for Kristi Noem and the other leadership in the Coast Guard, right? I mean, let's prioritize what we need to do, which is keeping this bad stuff out of the country.
I mean, I think that's really a practical understanding. Most people feel like they're way over the top, right? You don't need, fucking missile strikes to take out boats running drugs. I mean, this is like an episode of Miami Vice gone wrong. Like, it's just, you don't need that level of escalation, and you don't need to expose our military, our relationships, our alliances to that level of risk when it could be handled with something else. I want to extend that and ask you for the response in Idaho here. I mean, I think Americans are similarly responding to what looks heavy-handed by ICE. Right. And ICE is rolling out. And I think, Idaho's independent, right? You got people who are about civil liberties, who understand and appreciate freedom. And I think in most normal times, most Americans would push back on masked, unidentified people snatching Americans off the street and snatching anybody off the street, right? Drill down on that in Idaho. What are people saying about masked, unidentified people snatching people off the streets?
Yeah, we haven't had a huge ICE presence in the state yet, but we did have a big raid about a month and a half ago in a rural, predominantly Hispanic community, and ICE rolled in with the FBI, and it was this horse racing track that they were accusing of some illegal betting was going on there, but it was sort of a family day at the track, and ICE rolled in, and they were zip tying kids. They denied it, but you could see what was going on. It was super traumatic for everybody. A lot of, parents were picked up. Parents who've been working hard in Idaho's ag industry for 15 or 20 years. And actually the federal judge for Idaho demanded that ICE release 15 of those folks that were picked up. That happened last week. But, overall, and I'll say this, nobody likes what ICE is doing, and nobody wants an undocumented immigrant felon in the state. So number one, anybody that is undocumented and they commit a crime, right? I mean, particularly a felon, for God's sakes, like something's messed up if you're a felon. But, we've got this huge community, thanks to our decades-long broken visa system. We got this big community in Idaho that's fundamental to how our state functions. And we need to fix that. On the ICE raid, though, kudos to the police chief for Nampa, Idaho, and the sheriff of Canyon County, used to be actually chair of the National Sheriff's Association, who went after how ICE was characterizing it and misrepresenting the raid. These guys stood up and did the right thing and pushed back on it. And I was really impressed to see that.
I think that's such an important point here because police chiefs, sheriffs, local sheriffs are so critical to the community, and they know their communities, especially in rural areas. They know their people, they know the businesses, they know when stuff's going on, and the idea that ICE can come in and Bigfoot them, right, is really, I think, it's disrespectful, right? And it's also functionally bad because if the local sheriff doesn't know who the hell these masked guys are, then you got lots of conflict. You got guys with guns who don't know who the other guys with guns are. It reminds me of when we were in Iraq and we'd have a sector and all of a sudden contractors would roll in, right? Masked contractors, no identification. We don't know if they're Blackwater, who they are. They're not calling us on the same radios, and people can get killed. We can end up shooting each other, right? And we've been very lucky, I think, in many respects because there hasn't been, a lot of folks haven't died. There hasn't been, wires getting crossed, but it's a very real scenario where, you got sheriff on one side and ICE on the other side, and they're just not on the same radio frequency, right? Like the level of competence or incompetence that we see from some of these ICE guys that are very quickly trained. They don't have the same level of discipline. They don't have the same level of screening. They're getting $50,000 signing bonuses, and some of them were playing Call of Duty in their mama's basement a couple months before. I think the lack of quality, right, in professionalism is something that police chiefs and sheriffs are uniquely positioned to push back on.
Yeah. And just on the bad practices of ICE, got a couple buddies of mine that have been career law enforcement. One was a career FBI, actually Marine Corps officer before. Others, big police departments, LA and some others in Texas. And they've told me this is the most unprofessional organization they've ever seen, and they're disgusted by it. So listen, let's fix this broken visa system that we've got. Let's make sure that we find the felons and get them out of the country, and then the folks that are busting their ass, working hard every day in Idaho, paying sales tax, paying property tax, doing all the right things. Listen, we need them here. We need them here, but we got to fix this.
Next time you come on, I want to go deeper with you and others and find out to what extent ICE is cannibalizing law enforcement, right? Because if you're in a low-paid area of law enforcement, you feel like maybe you're not getting what you earned. ICE is buying them out. ICE is saying, hey, we'll give you $50,000. Come on over here. You get more money and less rules, right? Like we're not going to tie your hands. You can crack skulls, right? There's some number of people that are going to do that. And I wonder over time how the money specifically is going to erode some of the quality we have in local law enforcement. I think especially in rural areas, that's going to be one to watch. But let's pivot if we can, Todd. I know we're barnstorming here, but let's go to below the radar. Your race is below the radar. You're in Idaho. It's not a big market. You're not in D.C. and New York and L.A. You're banging away. But I think for folks who are watching what's happening, I think your race might be the most important one in the country, especially if you can win, right? Because you become the independent fulcrum. Give us a sit rep here. You're up against Risch. I mean, he's a billionaire. We know where he's voting. But for folks who are outside of this is, David versus Goliath. How's David doing here?
Yeah, well, he's not a billionaire, but he is the seventh richest in the Senate and the fourth oldest.
Thank you for the clarification.
The guy's got a lot of resources. By the way, despite his wealth, he's still cashing every one of his Senate paychecks, and he's sending out fundraisers, after me. So listen, these guys are scared. National Republican Senatorial Committee took a shot at me on Tuesday, 2 days ago. they went after the fact that I haven't filed a personal disclosure form yet, which is my miss. I actually wasn't aware of this thing. I'm an independent candidate with the skeleton team, but we'll get that fixed. But it just proves these guys are scared. They know how vulnerable Rich is. And they know that particularly, conservative Republicans do not like the fact that he's the fourth oldest and he's the seventh richest in the Senate. He hasn't held a town hall since he joined the Senate in 2009, a public in-person town hall. He's scared of the voters. He likes the smell of the marble in the Senate, and he's scared of Idahoans, and folks are tired of it.
I think it's a great example of where you're banging away. You are the kind of guy who can beat that kind of guy. And I think it cuts into the frustration that folks have across this country, the need for everything from affordability to national security experience. We're seeing it with Dan Osborne in Nebraska. We've had Ty Pickens here from Mississippi. We've had Brian Bangs. There are more coming. I'm excited to bring them in the days to come. There are folks who I think will run for Senate, who will run for the House, who are going to look and sound a little like you and Osborne and others. And that's part of our strategy is to multiply it. But you're kind of like Zelensky. Like, you don't need a ride, you need ammunition, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage folks to donate, to support, to volunteer, no matter what your party. But it feels like there's a movement galvanizing around you, and you're like one big, national news story away from everybody knowing your name like they know Dan Osborne.
Yeah. No, we're making great progress across the state. And as I said, red hats, truckers hats, hard hats and cowboy hats, everybody's showing up, everybody's having a conversation because, and I think what's got people excited is that we're not pointing the fingers. We're looking at the problems and we're asking ourselves, how do we solve these, right? How do we get this immigration system fixed? Which, Idaho's ag industry, and there's only one strategic industry in the state of Idaho, and that's ag, right? And ag is dependent on this. How do we get this thing fixed so that ag can operate, so that young Idahoans, have an opportunity to get good jobs in the ag industry, and we can solve for these, these multiple variables. But I tell you what, the national Republicans, they're scared shitless about what's going on in the state, and should be, because we're gonna win this thing.
Well, this is the exciting part, and I want folks to know that if you want to push back against the far right and the far left, independents like Todd Achilles are the way to do it. The solution to Trump is not the Democrats, it's independents like you. The solution to Mamdani is not the Republicans, it's an independent like you, and you are where most of the country sits. And I want folks to just think about how the world could be different a year from now if they go into a classified briefing and the Republicans come out with one story and the Democrats come out with another story. We should look to the independents. If you're there, as an example, I had Angus King on. I said he's in a really important place to be powerful, to be a moderator, to be a bridge, to try to get Republicans and Democrats to work together on things like the War Powers Act. He will have special gravitas because he's an independent. And if we can get a guy like you who's been in the Army especially, when you come out of that room, I think you're going to be a voice to watch. So I just want to underscore that for people. Like, think about how the world will be different if a little over a year from now, Todd Achilles is in the Senate.
Yeah. And I want to just build on one point, Paul, and that's the concept of the Fulcrum, right? Of the independents being the Fulcrum in the Senate. I share that vision in all of my town halls. That fires everybody up. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Dem or even an independent. When people hear oh my God, that you independents could actually get Congress functioning again, everybody's excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of like the referee, right? Like, we need a fucking referee right now. I mean, these guys are beating each other up and not getting things done, and it's not equal. But the idea that we could have someone who, who's able to call balls and strikes and who isn't a part of the rigged game, I think would be really, really important and powerful. All right, well, I know you got to get on the road, but before you do, it is Football Friday. I'm very happy that you're here for Football Friday. Football is important in Idaho. It's important in America. This is like a great time for football, right? We're almost into NFL playoffs, but now we're getting into college football playoffs. I'm going to ask you to rattle off a couple because I think college football is where it's at this weekend. And want to ask you to start off with one that maybe most folks aren't tracking on. We got the Mountain Conference Championship with UNLV at Boise State. UNLV is 10-2. They're hot this year, and Boise State, this is kind of an off year for them after you've come to expect them to have only like 1 or 2 losses. They're 8-4, but they're going to be on the Smurf turf at Boise State. Who you got in this one, man?
Listen, you're playing at home against Boise State. That stadium is just going to be rocking. They're going to pull this thing out. It's been a tougher season. We lost Genty, who was just a remarkable young man, athlete. But they're pulling it together, and we got the quarterback Madsen back. So my money's on Boise State.
Mine
I know
too.
I'm a politician, Paul, but my money's on the
Hey,
hometown.
I think that's a smart money pick. I'm not picking against Boise State at home. I love Genty, you know that. My kid loves Genty. It's hard watching him on the Raiders, but we're rooting for him always. And I always give a shout out to my buddy Isaac Henderson that I went through Army training with, who was a defensive back there back in the day before they became such a powerhouse. But I'm always rooting for Boise State. All right, let's go through a couple other quick ones. BYU at Texas Tech for the Big 12 championship. I feel like on the East Coast, people don't see BYU and Texas Tech as much, but Texas Tech, number 4 at home. Who you got in that one, man?
It's going to be a tough one. BYU and Boise State, there's a solid rivalry there. BYU's always had a good program, but I think the nod's going to go to Texas Tech, just given, what they've done this season.
I'm with you on that. I'm going to pick Texas Tech. I don't know if Mahomes is going to be there or not, but I'm going to pick Texas Tech to beat BYU. That could be a fun one. Let's go down to maybe normally the big game, but that's not the big game this week. It's the SEC championship. You got Georgia going into Alabama. Georgia's 11-1. Alabama's 10-2. We talked to General Harris yesterday, who's coming from Georgia. He's rooting for the Bulldogs. I'm going to go out here. I'm going to tell you, I'm picking Georgia. I think Georgia's a steamroller. Alabama's not what they used to be. I'm taking Georgia at number 3 to beat Alabama at home. Who you got?
Yeah, I think my money's on Georgia too. I think Alabama's they're a powerhouse, but this is an off year for them.
All right. Now the last one. Now we wouldn't have said this 5 years ago. The idea that number 2 Indiana, undefeated Indiana, would be going in to face Ohio State, and it's almost a pick 'em. I think a lot of folks are going to pick Ohio State here. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to root for Indiana. I saw them play against the Ducks of Oregon and beat them on the road. I think they got something really special going on. Their coach is awesome, and these guys are a steamroller and maybe even a team of destiny. Ohio State got past Michigan, but they have a tendency to blow the big game. So I'm going with Indiana here with the upset to beat Ohio State and remain the only undefeated team here. Who you got?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an emotional factor in this game, and I think the Indiana guys are going to be just pumped up for it.
I can't totally leave the NFL out, right? And we got Packers-Bears this weekend, which I think is kind of fun. I'm just going to drill down on that one. Packers are steadily racking up points here, and the Bears are like the great surprise this year. Who you got in Packers versus Bears, man?
My money's on the Bears.
All right, we're in heated agreement here. You got Todd Achilles here is on football, but I want to just point this back to folks. We've been talking a lot about local politics. And football is local politics in a lot of places. I know in Idaho, especially, y'all don't have a pro team. Boise State is it, right? So I can't imagine there are going to be too many folks who are doing anything other than watching that game tomorrow, right?
That's it. That's whatever is focused on.
All right. Well, as we continue to focus on you and end the week with some positivity, I think y'all have heard from Todd now. You understand why I'm rooting for him, why I think you should be too. I want to end the week with something good.
Something good. Oh, something sweet.
My something good is Charles Shea, a decorated Native American who was a 19-year-old U.S. Army medic when he landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. He's helped save lives. He's a true hero, a great example of the greatest generation, a true hero who led an incredible life. He passed this week at the age of 101. But Charles Shea, especially the role of Native American veterans during World War II, is often underappreciated. But this guy is the best of what our country is all about. I think our young people need role models who are not just football players or rappers or TikTok stars. And I encourage everybody to learn more about Charles Shea. I'll link to him in the show notes. But a true American hero. Our hats off to him and our condolences to his family. But we celebrate you, sir. You are definitely something good and even something great. Todd, over to you. What do you got for something good to end this week?
Yeah, I was actually reading the biography of Charles Shea, and I had the same reaction. I didn't know the story. Just absolutely remarkable, and just a life of service, right? And we've got 5 big tribes in the state of Idaho, and the participation in the military among members of the tribes is off the charts considered to the rest of the state. Lots and lots of examples on that. But for us, the snow's finally beginning to fall here. It's feeling like winter. I think I think what's interesting in terms of, or something to recognize, is we're beginning to see these little elements of where that political division is breaking down. You see more folks coming together, and I know it's kind of focused on the campaign, but there's a trend here, Paul. People are just like, they're ready for something new. That's my positive note. They're seeing that they're taking that step. They're taking that step to do something new. And it's really good to see. It's heartening. And I tell you what, this is the most beautiful state in the country with some absolutely phenomenal people. And it's been an honor to be on this journey. And we're just getting going.
Well, that is something good. And you are something good, because leadership matters. As we always talk about on this show, leadership is the problem right now in Washington, but leadership is also the solution. So I think your energy and your leadership is bringing those folks together and bringing out the best of your state. And I got to tell you, something good is your social media, right? I mean, it's smart and beautiful and real at the same time. So for folks, follow Todd Achilles every day, and he's going to be coming to you from some stunning place that looks like a movie scene. I mean, it almost looks like it's AI. I mean, it's so beautiful where you are. Then you're also Professor Todd. And I think this is really important. The role of a senator is to teach and to explain and to unpack some things that sometimes can be complicated. And I think you do that very well. It feels like, professor time with Idaho, with Idaho's Todd Achilles that I want to celebrate. I think it's really something good, and I hope folks will check it out. I also hope they'll support your campaign. You have my support. Donate, volunteer, spread the word about Todd's story. Tell them that he is fighting the good fight on behalf of everybody in Idaho, on behalf of veterans, but also on behalf of all Americans, and especially independent Americans. We're rooting for you, man, and keep after him.
Yeah, listen, Paul, I appreciate all of that, and appreciate all the hard work you do to be the voice of independence, to be the voice of America between the 40-yard lines, right? That's what we need more of, and you're doing a phenomenal job. So appreciate you, buddy.
Well, we're trying to build our Smurf turf stadium, man, and that way we can put more players on the field. So wish you and your family the best, and if we don't talk, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, man. All right, folks, that's Todd Achilles. He represents the future that we're talking about on this show. If you want to run for office like Todd Achilles, you're an independent, check out independentveteransofamerica.org. We are recruiting, we are supporting, and we are trying to elect guys and gals like Todd Achilles. And even if you don't want to run for office, there are ways for you to get involved, to support others who are stepping up, to fight for independence on issues like open primaries, which is a priority for us. So check out independentveteransofamerica.org. Check out Todd Achilles' campaign. We'll link to it in the show notes. And I'm serious. Go check out his Instagram page. It's really cool, and all the stuff he's putting out. We are daily now. As you found out this week, we had a wide range of guests. I want to thank all of them for joining us, and especially Senator Angus King, who joined us on Wednesday. Go back and check that out. It's really important that we show the full spectrum of someone like Todd Achilles, who's running to be in a spot like Senator Angus King, who can be a fulcrum for all of us. Follow Independent Americans everywhere. We're on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. We're really seeing tremendous growth on YouTube. That's thanks to all of you. Spread it far and wide. Spread this kind of independent information and inspiration. You can get IA merch for the holidays. It's coming up, and chip in a few bucks and join our Patreon community. I will bring you many more independent candidates in the next couple of weeks, and your support makes that happen. I'm also going to be on MS Now later, I think, with Ari Melber, might be on CNN. We'll continue to put that out on our social media as well. Folks say America's divided, but you're hearing from Todd Achilles and others that that's changing. It's changing because of leadership, because of our community, because folks are stepping up like Todd Achilles. So if you're a part of that, spread the word, invite people to join this independent community that's providing hope for the future. Country over party, people over politics, light over heat, challenging that status quo. Todd Achilles is an example of that, and it shows how our movement is growing. If you like this episode with Todd, share it far and wide, and invite others to declare their independence. And stay vigilant out there, my friends. I know it's chaotic, but there is clarity in this storm, and you can be a part of it because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And you are not alone in that vigilance. You're seeing it every day now on this show. I'm bringing you more and more voices that I hope you can connect with, you can relate to, and you can root for, because we're all vigilant and we're all in this together. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. Thank you for tuning in to Independent Americans. I hope you enjoy the holidays. It's starting to kick in. I hope that gives you some fuel and joy, and I hope it motivates you to help some others. Big shout out to my kids who put the tree up while I was gone. We're going to finish that this weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Happy weekend, everybody. Stay vigilant, America, and good luck to Boise State. See you on Monday.
Just
Righteous Media.